In this video, I'll be making two different breakfast casseroles for an Easter brunch. First off, a tater tot breakfast casserole, and then the second one is a cinnamon baked French toast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell to be notified when new videos become available. Comments are welcome. Okay, so it's the day before Easter, and I'm just going to be prepping the casserole so that I can just throw them in the oven on Easter morning and they'll be ready and hot when people are arriving. So I got the two recipes here for the tater tot breakfast casserole and the cinnamon baked French toast. I'm going to do the tater tot breakfast casserole first. So I'm going to get started by frying up bacon. I'm going to be using some thick cut bacon. And I'll just fry this up here on medium high. And it calls for only 8 ounces. So I'll just use half of this package, which is a pound. And what I'm going to be doing with the bacon, once I get it fried, I'm going to chop it up. Then it's going to go into the egg mixture. So I'm going to do it pretty crisp. I like crispy bacon anyway. But that way we'll have crispy chunks of bacon in there. See, I got everything out, I think. Pretty much everything out and ready to go. I'm just going to get this bacon out and then and started, and then I'm going to start mixing up the rest of that casserole. Making it. Let's check our recipe. Yes, and this is a tater tot recipe. Doesn't use hash browns, uses tater tots and eggs, of course. Okay, before I forget, I'm going to spray both these pans with cooking oil. And both these casseroles go in a 9x13 baking dish. This is just a 32-ounce bag of tater tots. And I've thawed these out already. Probably since I'm making this ahead, you wouldn't need to thaw them out. I think if you're making it if you bake it right after you make it, you already want these thawed so that they cook a little better. Basically, the recipe calls to put half of these on the bottom, and then we'll dump in the egg mixture, and then we'll put the other half on the top. But it really looks like they're not gonna, or I don't have enough to do that actually. And realistically, probably nobody's gonna be able to see this anyway. Whether or not they're lined up or not, you can probably just dump half of them in there and spread them out. There we go, nice and neat. But as you can see, it's not many, not a lot of tater tots left. Just check the recipe again. Maybe I'm just taking this a little too literally. Take some of these back out. Okay, so the recipe calls for 10 eggs, 10 large eggs. We need 1 cup of whole milk. You need a half a cup of sour cream. In case you're wondering, the strawberries are to put on top of the French toast. We'll be cutting those up later. Alright, so we'll just whisk this up. Now I think with this we want to make sure we get the eggs all well mixed up, well beaten. You don't want different, you don't want white and yolk in there, that you want it all mixed well. Let's check on our bacon here. I'm just going to get a plate ready here with some paper towels for the bacon. So when it's ready, I can set it off there to drain. An electric mixer might work real good here. I don't want to get it dirty. Okay, now this calls for some green onions or scallions. The recipe calls for the white and the green parts to be separated, presumably to be put in at different places or different. But I just end up dumping them all in. I don't see where it makes it. Might be able to put the green ones on the top at the end if you want, but we're going to put parsley on it. I don't know. I think you just better probably just dump them all in. And let's cook up the last few pieces. And we got some parsley. It calls for 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley to go into the egg mixture. Just cut the trunks off the little trees there. And the bigger chef's knife would make this easier, but I don't want to get it dirty yet. Now, because for a 4-ounce jar of pimientos, diced pimientos. I didn't want to pick them out of a jar of olives, so they actually have just jars of pimientos. So we just got a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt, teaspoon of black pepper. There's where I just decided, let's just throw them in. The recipe calls for Colby Jack cheese, so that's what I got. We just need 2 cups of it, which would be about 8 ounces. I'll get out the big knife now. So that's a 1-pound block of cheese. So I'm just going to cut it in half, grate that up. Of course, I cut it crooked. There's Murphy checking, see if I dropped anything. So basically, we need to just save a 1/2 cup of this cheese for the end, so the rest of it goes in. So about 1.5 cups goes in. So we'll just save that. And actually the cheese we're not going to put on till just before we bake it. I'm not sure it would actually matter much. I don't think the cheese is going to absorb any liquid or anything. Maybe it would sink in. I don't know. But that's what I'll do. So now I'm going to chop up the bacon. I got this nice and crispy. I don't even hardly need to chop it. I could just break it up with my fingers probably. Okay, so now I'm going to pour this over the tater tots that I already have in the pan, or the baking dish. I switched over to a rubber spatula, a spoonula actually, just so I'll be able to spread it around there, try to get it spread out evenly. Trying to make sure all those tater tots are on the bottom. And now we're just going to put the rest of the tater tots on the top. Now I already know there's not enough to cover the whole thing close together like I'm doing here. So I don't have enough, obviously, to cover it like I'd like, but just going to spread them out and make them kind of look even. Okay. Like I meant to do that. Okay, so basically that casserole is done for now. I'm just going to put some plastic on the top, and then it's going to go into the refrigerator until tomorrow morning when I go to bake it. And before I bake it, I'm going to just spread over the rest of the cheese. And then once it comes out of the oven, I'll put on some parsley. Some more chopped parsley for a little garnish. One trick you have to deal with here when you're, or one thing you have to deal with is when you're making the casseroles ahead, of course, is that you need space in the refrigerator to hold these big casseroles. So that will be another challenge later to find room in the refrigerator for this. I'm just going to bag up the cheese. So it'll be all ready. Of course, I'm making them ahead just to make it easier on Easter Sunday, so I now have to get up at 5 a.m. or something and make casseroles and bake them and stuff. I like to cook, not that much. And so now I'm going to chop up the parsley that I'll use to put on the top after it comes out of the oven. This time I have my bigger chef's knife. It'll work much better to chop this up. That ought to be good. Another baggie. Okay, and I'm just going to keep that cheese and the parsley there with that casserole. So hopefully I won't forget to do it. If I just put that somewhere else in the refrigerator, I'll probably forget it. Okay, so now we'll get started on the French toast. Now I already oiled the pan, the baking dish. But this, we actually want butter in there, so I'm going to go ahead and do that too. You wouldn't have to, but probably better to have butter for your French toast. I find the easiest way is just to leave it in the paper the butter comes in. I'm going to wipe the oil out because I can't. The butter won't smear in there. It's too slick. Okay, that's a little better. I'm just going to get a good coating of butter on here. So that'll flavor the French toast and make sure it doesn't stick to the pan. Maybe fry up the edges a little bit. And sometimes you can just use the paper itself, just peel it off or if you save them, you know, when you take the butter out. But I actually I want a bit more butter this time, so I'm just going to smear the stick on there. And this is unsalted butter, by the way. I don't think it would matter much if you use salted. Or I wouldn't notice it at all. Alright, so the recipe calls for a loaf of French bread, which I obviously have there. And it's actually just been sitting for a few days since I bought it at the store. So it's nice and crusty. It is actually still pretty soft on the inside, but I think the crustier the better on this for this recipe. It is going to sit overnight though and soak up the milk and eggs that are going to go on top. And that's part of the deal, is you do need to let this one sit actually. So I think if you wanted to bake this the same day, you just want to let it sit for a few hours in the fridge. But probably more is better so it soaks up the egg and milk mixture. I'm just going to cut this into kind of large cubes. But you could just use, if you have a day-old bread or you've saved up, you could save up your old bread. Make this casserole too instead of buying a loaf. Dang, just get all the crumbs, everything in there. More stuff to soak up the egg and milk. So this recipe calls for 8 eggs, 8 large eggs. Two cups of whole milk. Need a half cup of heavy cream. Now, I did get out a new one because I thought this one in the refrigerator wasn't very full, but it has enough definitely for a half cup. So that was 3/4 cup of sugar, white sugar. Now we're gonna put some vanilla in there. I think definitely the best place to get vanilla is Costco. If you get real vanilla. I haven't found anywhere that has good real vanilla as cheap as Costco. Alright, back to mixing up the eggs and milk. Reminiscent of the other casserole. Again, I want to make sure these eggs get mixed up good. I don't want any egg whites or whatever in there that you can see separated out. Again, electric mixer probably would have been a good idea. Oh well. Alright, so now I just need to dump that over the bread. Actually, maybe a better way to do this would actually just be dump the bread into the bowl, mix it all up Although if you used a smaller bowl, you wouldn't be able to do that. But I'm just going to mix it up here in the pan. Now, I just want to make sure everything is well coated with the eggs, and so I don't want any dry pieces of bread there. Although maybe that makes some nice crusty chunks, I don't know. I think it'd be better all mixed in. If you try this and leave crusty chunks out, you'll have to let me know if it's better or worse. Alright, so the French toast is basically done until you do to bake it tomorrow. Or this part of the casserole is done, I guess I should say. There's actually a crumble that goes on top, which I still need to make. And of course I have the strawberries. But this part is done. Alright, so now we're going to make the crumble that goes on top. And this is kind of like the crumble that goes on top of a coffee cake. Basically the same kind of thing. So it's got some flour and brown sugar and cinnamon, butter. I'm going to do a half cup of brown sugar. This is the light brown sugar, but you could use the dark as well. Either one. The dark, of course, has more molasses in it, but I don't know if you'd be able to taste the difference here. Got our cinnamon. And cinnamon's another great thing to buy at Costco. You get this huge thing of cinnamon for pretty cheap. It's good stuff. Just a little bit of salt, 1/4 teaspoon, basically kind of a pinch, just to bring out the flavors. Bacon grease. I'm going to save that. I have a jar in the refrigerator, bacon grease. So I'll pour that in there a little later after once it's pretty cool now at that point, but I'll do it after I get done. And the nutmeg. You got some fresh nutmeg, sort of fresh. It's not really fresher than the ground, though. It doesn't lose its flavor as much. It's better freshly ground, I should say. Just a little bit of that. That's one of those things, kind of like bay leaves. Add some flavor that you just don't notice. You'll notice it if it's not there. You'll think, oh, what is that? What's missing? Now we want 1 stick of butter, and you want cold butter. You don't want to warm this up or have it at room temperature or anything. You want it to be cold. And what we're going to do is cut that into there, and so the crumble will be kind of like small gravel. That's what you want. So I'm going to cut this up into small pieces and then dump it in there. And then when you're making this, you kind of want to work. You don't want to work slow. You want to try to get this done while the butter is still cold. You don't want the butter to melt. So once I get it done, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, along with the casserole, of course, so that it doesn't melt, so it stays like little chunks of gravel. Now there's one of those butter wrappers. You could save that and then use it to grease up pans later. I usually don't, but I usually just use the spray oil, but something you could do. So I'm going to use this. We got this little wire cutter, I guess. This is specifically for doing this, for mixing the butter into mixtures like this. You can also use it when you're making biscuits. If you're making biscuits by hand, you can do this too. That makes your biscuits more flaky. You make them this way, or use Crisco instead of butter. But There's different kinds of these cutters. I think, that have like flat blades on them, or you can also just use like a couple of knives or a fork, or if you haven't done this you can also do it by freezing the butter, have the frozen butter, and then grate it with your cheese grater and just dump it in, mix it up. I should have thought about that. I might have done it on here. Because that'd work perfect and be easier than this. But you can see what we're working towards here to make these kind of like gravelly, small pebbles. And then when it bakes, it'll make little chunks of caramelized sugar and butter. Okay, now this crumble goes on the French toast before it goes in the oven. But you don't want to put it on now because you don't want it to melt into the casserole at this point. And you need to keep this refrigerated with the casserole, or keep it refrigerated anyway, because you don't want that butter to melt. Not until it's in the oven. So I'm just going to put it right with the casserole, and I put it in the refrigerator that way, and that way I hopefully won't forget it. Now the recipe also calls for, optionally, some fresh fruit to go on there. And I think they were more meaning like blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, something like that. And they call for it to go, you put it on top of the French toast casserole, and then you put the crumble on top of that, so it'll like all melt down in together. But since I got strawberries, since they were what was on sale, I don't know if that'll work too good with strawberries to bake them in the oven on top of there. It might work good, but so what I've decided to do is I'm going to slice them up and put a little sugar on them and mix them up, and then we can we'll put them on top of the French toast after it's baked, so they'll still be fresh. And if you haven't done fresh strawberries before, you do want to make sure you check through them because they get mold on them. There'll be a little like white fuzz on the outside. Also, there's bad spots, of course, but mold you really want to look for, because they sit in the containers and they can get a little moist, when they get sprayed and the mold starts growing on them. It's not dangerous, but it's not great to eat. And I'm just going to get out a handy dandy little rack here, put it a little closer. That scene crank is really handy, inexpensive, and you can just put it out when you need it, take it down when you don't. It's great for doing cleaning vegetables and stuff. So you can just spray them off and then let them sit on there and drain off. One thing I saw the other day, it's interesting, is the strawberries we get in the US mostly have white interior. But I guess over in the UK or in Europe, the varieties they have are red on the inside, or pink. So the white doesn't mean they're not ripe or anything. It's just, although some of these are kind of marginal ripeness, but no, the white is normal. Maybe at a farmer's market or something, or somebody's home garden, you can get some that have the red or pink interiors. This is 2 pounds of strawberries I'm doing here. So you can just pick whatever kind of fruit you want. All right, so those are ready to go in the refrigerator. Now, I wasn't able to film the baking the next morning. That was just too much of a hassle, so I apologize for that. Also, I did decide to go ahead and mix some sugar in with the strawberries, just sweeten them up a little bit. So you might want to do that, just not a lot, just a little bit. Okay, so here's the casseroles ready to go into the refrigerator overnight so I can cook them the next morning. All right, now here they are the next morning. You can see I put the shredded cheese on there on the breakfast casserole, and then I spread the crumble out onto the French toast casserole. Looks lovely. Okay, and then here's after baking them for an hour, a little over an hour. And I spread the parsley on. They turned out really well and disappeared pretty quickly. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please like, subscribe, and click that notification bell to be notified when new videos become available.